Hello everybody, I am so excited about this video today. Do I say that every time? Probably. I'm usually excited. I am excited about this video today. It is probably the most requested thing that I have, other than like what lipstick color are you wearing, is what cards do you pull and how do you use them? So I'm going to talk to you about that today. Before we get started, tell me in the comments below, do you use cards and do you have a favorite deck? If you like to pull oracle cards or tarot cards, share your favorite deck in the comments below. I would love to hear about it. Or if you have questions about using a deck that don't get answered in the video, you can put those in the comments below as well, and I will happily answer them. Now, here's the thing you should know. I have a favorite deck, and that deck is at home. I forgot that I was recording this video today, and I keep most of my cards at the office, but I have one deck that I use at home and I forgot to bring it with me, but it is my absolute favorite deck, so I'm going to tell you about that one at the end. But I do have every other card deck that I own here that I will share with you as we move on. Okay, so let's talk first about how I use decks. So there are two kinds of decks. First, there's tarot, and then there are oracle cards. Tarot is a specific thing. It's a specific kind of card deck that is built around a major arcana and a minor arcana, and then like I call them the family cards, which are like king, queen, page, that kind of thing. Tarot decks there's like an original, there's like they have the same meaning, everybody agrees on, like, you know, there's like maybe variations of the meaning for each card, but in general, everybody uses them the same way, right? Like they have a ton of different artists draw different variations of the card, but the cards are the same. Okay, so the cards are the same, different artists, major arcana, minor arcana. That's what you need to know about tarot. Tarot is like the original card deck to use like this. You know, when you think about cards, you're usually thinking about tarot. It's like the death card, or, you know, you're worried about pulling the death card, whatever. So that is that. Oracle cards are made by individuals and they can kind of be anything. It has like a general idea. Typically there's a theme to them. Every card represents something specific, and you can pull the card and it will kind of speak to you in its own way. Here's how I use tarot and oracle cards. I use them the same. They are access points to my intuition. I think a lot of times when we think about tarot specifically, the media portrays it as like future telling or like prediction, but really I think it's just an access point to our intuition, and sometimes that's our intuition for other people as well, right? Like if I sit down with a really good tarot reader, usually it's like they're tapping into their intuition of me, which I think is really just kind of being observant, like being able to read body language, you know, picking up on subtle cues, things like that. I'm not going to go into, that's my interpretation of it. I know there are lots of different ones. This is how I think about it. But for me, I use it to tap into my own intuition, my own access point. So if I pull a card, I'm gonna observe the card, look at the picture, think about what that's saying to me, and then I'll probably read the artist's description of what they intend for the card to mean. And then I will see, you know, what does that bring up for me? How does this impact my life? It's kind of like a good journaling prompt, right? Like it's just information, and you get to, your brain makes the connections it wants to make, right? Like it's not like magic. It can sometimes be eerily accurate, and I think that accuracy is just like, oh, it tapped into the part of me that needed to express this thing or needed to understand this thing in a certain way. It just is a connector to you, from you to your intuition, okay? So that's how I use the cards. Typically, I pull one card every day. I go with the deck I'm most drawn to at the moment. So right now, that's the deck that I told you about that I'll share with you at the end. That's at home. I go with the one I'm drawn to. Or if I have a specific need in my life and there's a deck that meets that need or speaks to that part of me, then I will pull on that deck specifically. And I'll run through each of these decks and kind of tell you why I pick each one, or when I'm usually drawn to each one of them. So I do that, and then I usually journal a little bit on kind of what it brings up for me, and that usually is the starting point for my daily journaling practice. So that is how I use the cards. The next way that I use the cards is at the new moon and the full moon. So the new moon, I usually do a spread. In Brave Collective, I have like suggested spreads where you pick a question for each card that you pull, and then that can kind of give you some inspiration for how you want to move forward in planning for the new moon or the full moon. In general, I think about the new moon as what I'm wanting to call in and the full moon as what I want to release. And I guide my card spreads for that. So in Brave Collective, I have one for every month of the year, new moon and full moon, and I use those spreads for myself. So that is how I use the cards and kind of why I use them. Do I think you need to have as many decks as I have? No. Do I think it matters if you have more? No. But I usually just buy one if I feel drawn to it, or if I'm wanting to do something nice for myself. It's always a good way for me to kind of give myself a present. But in general, when you're thinking about picking a card deck, you don't necessarily want to pick the one that I like best. You're gonna want to go for the one that you feel the most drawn to, the one that you feel the most connected to. And I really think, like, especially as you're learning tarot and if you're someone who wants to be able to use tarot without a book and you really want to quickly access what it means for you, you may want to stick to the same tarot deck for a while. Right now, I'm only using the deck that I told you about that's at home. So then when I pull a card, I visually know, do I know this card? You know what I mean? If I'm switching back and forth between different artists, then it's a little bit harder for me to remember what does the Five of Wands mean. But if I can visually remember, oh, I've seen this card before, I remember when it connected to this other, you know what I mean? You can start to see the patterns in your life. So there's that. There is an element of energetic cleaning that you can do, and I'll tell you about that. I will say I'm kind of a practical woo person. Like, I do a lot of the woo stuff, but in a very practical way. So do I necessarily do this all the time? No. Do I feel like I need to do this sometimes just so I feel like centered and connected and like clean? Yes. So what that looks like is you can take your deck and you can use a cleaning agent, an energetic cleaning agent. So that might be Florida water, that might be sage or Palo Santo, or like a bundle of lavender, just a little bit more environmentally sustainable. Something that's local to your region is ideal, and just kind of like use the smoke and use it around it, or spray the Florida water if you want to. And then you take the deck and you knock on it 3 times, like 1, 2, and then a hard knock for 3. And the idea is that you're connecting your energy to the cards so that you and the cards are connected. And then you just give it a good shuffle and just kind of like get in tune with the deck itself. And you can also use selenite crystal and just tap it, kind of like activate it if you want to. Again, for me, this is more symbolic than like literal. For some people, it is literal. It's not for me as much. It's just more kind of like a symbol for I'm committed to connecting to this space and being present here. I want to release other people's energy from my intuition. I want to separate your emotions from my experience with these cards. So that is, I think, everything that I would need to share about the cards specifically. I want to make sure I have like a pull to the cards. I feel connected to them. They're visually appealing to me before I purchase. I'm going to run through the oracle decks that I have first and just kind of talk to you about when I use them and why I use them. So the first deck I have, you've already seen, is the deck from Rebecca Campbell. It's called Work Your Light Oracle Cards. I use these when I'm wanting to be a little bit more esoteric. I don't know if that's the right word, like a little bit less grounded. Like, I want to be more in like the spiritual realm. Like, she's very far down the woo train in terms of like, she speaks like, this is fact, this is what's real, these beings, these alien beings existed, that kind of stuff. If I'm in the zone to go there, I will go there with this deck. It's a fun gateway into deep woo work. I have some that are like way deeper woo work, but this is kind of like your modern entry point to that. They're also really beautiful. They're very feminine, so if I'm feeling like I want to connect to my feminine energy, I will go here. The next oracle deck that I have is Literary Witches. This was a gift from my friend Tyler. Hi Tyler, thank you. And these are really fun, especially if I want to connect to like the writer part of me, which is how I think of like my essence or my soul is kind of like the part of me that writes and creates in that specific way. And so when I want to touch into her and feel connected to her, then I use this deck. This deck doesn't have like a ton of like description as to what they want you to take away from it. It's more a description of like what that writer represented in history. So in that way, it's much more like you're interpreting that meaning for yourself in a much more intense way, and I appreciate that actually. So these cards are great for that. In fact, I think I'm going to take these home for the weekend. Next, the Crystal Stone deck. I think this also might have been a gift from Tyler. Tyler, you're amazing. This is a similar thing as the Literary Witches, where it's not going to tell you exactly what you should take away from it. More so, it can kind of tell you which stones you want to play with. This is a great resource if you are someone who wants to use crystals in your life, but you don't know how to begin learning them, because it has like a ton of crystals, and on the back, it shares with you what that crystal is, who needs it, where to put it, and when to use it. It's an amazing resource for that. Again, I'm gonna see if it's focusing on that. Yeah. Again, you know, this is the guidebook for it. It's very different than some of the other ones you'll see, which are like books, but it is a great resource if you're wanting to learn crystals or work with crystals, or if you just want to like tap into the energy of what that crystal represents for you. Great one. Let's do the next one. This is another one that I think is a good gateway card deck. People tend to really like this deck and feel drawn to it. It's very trendy at the moment. And this is the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit deck. This one's fun to play with as well. But see what I mean by this has got like a book attached to it versus some of that little pamphlet kind of thing. This goes in depth. It's different animals and the illustrations are just stunning, and I think that's why so many of us are drawn to it. And you pull an animal and it just kind of tells you like how to channel the energy of that animal in, and what that means for your day and your life. And so I usually pull these when I'm feeling a little bit like disconnected. I think this is a good one. I'm like, I don't really remember why I pull cards. This kind of brings it down to like a fun, playful place for me, but still connected to the spiritual aspect of it. Okay, gosh, I have a lot. All right, next is the Goddess Guidance Oracle cards by Doreen Virtue. Doreen Virtue is my favorite card maker. I have 3 of her decks. This is the very first deck I ever bought. Well, I bought a tarot deck that I no longer have first, but then this was my first oracle deck, and this is the first one I really got in the habit of using regularly. It has a different goddess, you know, on every card, and then it has a little quote from that goddess, and then there's also a book as well. So this is Rhiannon is a sorceress. You are a magical person who can manifest your clear intentions into reality. So it's like that, and then you also have the booklet that goes deeper into that. Hers always come with the message, but also other ways you can think about the card, and then also a practice that you can do, like what's a meditation you can do or something you can think about. I really like that. Hers are the most spiritual for me of all the cards that I use. Anything by her, I'll share you 2 other decks of hers next. This is when I want to feel like connected to my femininity and connected to like the power of being a woman. I use these. And if I'm doing like healing work around my relationship to women, I use these as well. This is maybe, is this one of my favorite decks? I think this is one of my favorite decks. This is the Sacred Rebels Oracle. I went through like a solid maybe 2 years of primarily using this deck. This is it's the same, it's Doreen Virtue, it's the same person as, is that accurate? No, this is Elena Fairchild. I gotta accept. So Doreen Virtue made this one. Elena Fairchild made these 2 that I was gonna tell you about. So, sorry, I lied to you. I don't have 3 from her, I have 2 from Elena Fairchild. So, Sacred Rebels is a similar energy as this, but it's a little bit more spicy. So, if I'm wanting to feel like vibrant and passionate and powerful, like I can do anything, I can burn this all down and start over, this is the one I reach for. I'll show you the artwork on these cards as well. And again, this one has like another full book for us. She also does like you have the definition of the card and then like a practice you can do with that card. And again, these feel much more spiritually connected, more like sacred to me. Some of the others, like the Crystal deck, the Literary Witches, even the Animal one and even the Rebecca Campbell one, like those don't feel as like spiritually connective for me as the Goddess Guidance. These are like my two like very spiritual, like kind of prayers for me, if you want to call it that. I don't know how else to call it. I have this wrap someone sent this to me. They make them. I'll try and find her Instagram handle and share with you. This is the Earth Warriors Oracle by Elena Fairchild as well. I haven't felt very connected to this one. I will say, I think I feel a little bit about it, like on like an appropriation level. I know I'm not super aware of like Elena Fairchild's background or who she is. I could do some research around that, but it feels a little appropriative. So I don't feel strongly. I haven't used this much, and when I do use it, it feels off. It just doesn't feel right to me. So that's the reality of that one. It's beautiful and I want to love it because I love the Sacred Rebel deck so much that I wanted another one of hers, but it just feels not quite right for me. This one is actually one that was made by an acquaintance of mine. I used to go to her like women's circle meetings, and I bought this at one of those. And she's like a pleasure coach, and so this is her pleasure deck. This one is so good for me. So good for me because I get so in work mode and I just get so robotic sometimes about like getting things done, and I just want to like work all the time. I love to work. So this really gives me energy to like tap into just like full on like pleasure indulgent. I like at one of her circles that I went to, she had us like take turns like being like the demander of our wants and our needs. So good. We had to be like, feed me a strawberry, get me some champagne. Like it was awkward for me, but also so empowering and such a good reminder that like you can just ask for what you want. But so this is what she does, and this was really good for me. So I'll try and pull one for you. Sometimes they're a little spicy. So her Dare to Desire. Your wants, yearning, and desires are given to you for a reason. Pay attention. What desire do you possess that scare you? Which ones are too big, too unrealistic, too embarrassing to even admit? Say them aloud now. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but that's kind of the thing of her card, her card deck. I will try and find her information too and comment below because this deck is really fun. It's got like tantalizing touch, private party, things like that. So it's a good one to get you a little out of your comfort zone, but also like increase your access to pleasure. Okay, and then this is probably the lightest, like least spiritually connective deck that I have. They're affirmators at work. So there are affirmators that aren't work related. These are the ones that for work, which I prefer. At one launch of Brave Collective Lifetime, I sent these to every Lifetime member. I don't send it to every Lifetime member, whoever signs up, but during that particular promotion I did. And these are fun because they just are good, like when they're healthy work practices, but they're written kind of silly and playful. When I worked in the office with Tyler, I would sometimes just make them pull cards with me, and these are the ones I would use. So here's the one I pulled for us today. So you can kind of get a feel for what the tone of the cards are. These are definitely a great starter card, especially if you are self-employed and just want to like pull a card before you start your work day and make sure that you have like a healthy relationship to your work environment. The only thing I don't love about these cards is this. That is surprisingly more annoying than you would think. It impacts you more than you realize. Okay, so these are all of my Oracle decks that I have currently. I have 2 tarot decks. The one is at home that I love the most, and I'll tell you about it, but this is the tarot deck that I use. It's the original. It's by A.E. Waite tarot deck. And this is the booklet that comes with it. It's like tiny, teeny tiny. So I don't really use this, but it does have the history of the artist and everything in it, which I love. And then I just think these are the most beautiful cards ever. I just find them so stunning. Like, oof. And so this is kind of the original tarot deck. It has like, you know, all of it's like the sun, the wands, cups, pentacles, swords. You know, when you think of tarot cards, that's what these are. These are like where it all began. Now, the ones that aren't here, that I currently feel the most connected to and I love the most are the Line Strider deck. It's absolutely stunning, and that's just the tarot deck that I use the most. It feels the most like me. I feel visually very drawn to it. It also has an amazing book that comes with it. It's very big, very thick, very in-depth. The other thing that you should know is that the book that I like a lot, especially if you're learning tarot for the first time, the book with the Line Strider deck is great, like tips for spreads you can do, how to use your cards, that kind of thing. Then there's a book called WTF is Tarot by a girl who owns a magic shop in Durham. And she wrote like a perfect entry-level book to learning tarot. So she has like in-depth descriptions of all of the major arcanas especially, and then each of the major arcana that she does, which are like death card, tower card, that kind of thing. One that's not a suit card, like pentacles, cups, wands, and swords, those are suit cards, and then the major arcana is like the sun, the moon, the fool, those kind of things. She's like a description of that, and then she has like an anecdote from her personal life of like how that showed, like what that looks like in action, and then she has like other ways that you can interpret this in a reading. So helpful. But in the beginning she just teaches you tarot and teaches you how to learn tarot. It's really, really good. So those are all of my resources for cards and how I use them and how you may want to use them too if that interests you at all. And as always, please let me know if you have a card deck that you love below, or if you have a question about cards, leave that in the comments below as well. And as always, like, subscribe, you know the drill. I will see you all in the next episode. Cheers.